Good afternoon. My name is Beth Angel, and I'm the Dean of the VCU School of Social Work, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all to our event, Social Work and Climate Change, Lessons on Interdisciplinary Response. Thank you for joining us. The first thing I want to tell you is I want to let you know that we are recording this session, and I would like for you to just take a moment to read this housekeeping slide. The event is being recorded and will be made available at a later date. Live closed captioning is available at this time, and a recording with the captioning will be available at a later date. And if you would like to ask a question or make a comment during the event, the chat icon is located at the bottom of your screen. Please remember to change the drop down in the chat menu to all panelists and attendees before you post, and that way everyone will be able to see your comment. This event is presented by the VCU School of Social Work's C. Bernard Scotch Fund. Established in 2011, the fund supports programs that advance macro social work practice. And the fund honors Emeritus faculty member Charles Bernard, also known as Bernie Scotch, Ph.D., who passed in 2010. The focus of our event today is environmental justice. And for those of you who are longtime social workers and who've been in our field for a long time, you may have done a little bit of a double take or asked yourself, you know, an event in social work on environmental justice, what's going on there? And part of the reason for that surprise may be that this has not been traditionally viewed as one of the fields of social work practice, but this view is shifting. And it's one of the reasons that it's shifting is that as social workers, we're witnessing the ways that climate change is affecting vulnerable people and communities. In social work, those of you who are social workers know that we believe in a person and environment perspective. And this means that it's critical to consider the natural environment as well as the rest of the environment and how the natural environment links to things like inequality, racism, and other forms of oppression. So if our work is concerned with advancing social justice, we have to advance environmental justice as part of that. And so for this reason, I'm so excited that this year's event, sponsored by the Scotch Fund, will focus on this issue. And I'm also really, really excited that one of our faculty experts in this area, Dr. Kimberly Compton, helped conceptualize this event and will serve as our moderator today. So I'd like to begin by introducing Dr. Compton. Dr. Kimberly Compton, Dr. Kimberly S. Compton is a 2013 M.S.W. graduate of the VCU School of Social Work and a 2021 Doctor of Philosophy graduate. She recently took on the new role as M.S.W. Program Assistant Director in addition to her role as an instructor. Dr. Compton's dissertation was entitled Pro-Environmental Behaviors Among Black Environmentalists, a Critical Race Perspective. We are so honored to have such stellar faculty experts at our school, and I would like to personally thank Dr. Compton for moderating today's event and to turn things over to her.
Thank you, Dr. Angel, for a wonderful introduction. And it just does feel surreal to be here because it's been years of work. That's not just it's not my own, right? And I stand on the shoulders of so many who have brought to the forefront issues of climate change, environmentalism, and environmental justice into the work of social work. And we stand on the shoulders of so many others who have prioritized, I think about the civil rights movement and prioritizing environmental issues as civil rights issues. And so we're here today because of them and also because of generations and generations and generations before them as well. So thank you. And so yes, I'm Dr. Kimberly Compton, and I am faculty here, and I study environmental justice, and especially the ways in which we have not yet conceptualized environmentalism and environmental justice, and really expanding our ideas of what it could be. And that's in part why I know all of these wonderful people who are here today. And so I am excited to bring together today the expertise of Kim Sudderth and Jennifer Ciminelli and Cameron Carter. And it's, thank you all so much for being here, and we'll hear more introductions in just a moment. We are here in part because of what is happening collectively within our university, where all incoming students are being asked to read Rising, have been asked to read Rising by Elizabeth Rush. And if you haven't gotten your hands on that, I encourage you to read these dispatches. And it's really a mix of tragic and a lot of love, and a lot of where do we go from here, and all these vignettes that Elizabeth Rush brings together across the coast. And so I would encourage you to access that as well. But we know that globally, right, not just within our university, globally, climate change and rising sea levels are of grave concern to each of us, and to the people that we work with, and to different groups, historically voiceless and historically marginalized groups in particular. And we know that Rush paints this really bleak picture of the effects of sea level rise. And it's not just that things are wet. There's physical effects, but there's also these emotional and psychological and spiritual effects that we see in community and among us. And I know that we'll touch on this as we talk with each person who's here today. And just as a note, we are here, the people that you see on video, and also our other participants today, we're here in earnest, even without all the answers for how to solve climate change. So I'll just put that caveat out there. If you were coming to this webinar to see that, we don't have those answers for you, but we're here to respond to some of the things that Rush talks about, right, in her book, right, that the solutions to these kinds of problems are huge. She says we're going to have to move infrastructure, we're going to have to move people. Those are enormous tasks. And so we're here to talk about how different disciplines could come together, potentially to partner on a big issue like climate change. And so with that in mind, I'd actually like to go ahead and start and turn this over to our fishbowl participants here today. So let's start with some introductions. First, Jen Ciminelli, tell us a little bit about who you are and some of the water-related threats you're seeing in your work, and some of the solutions to these water-related threats that you or your field are working on. So a big question, but yeah, get us grounded in who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate it. So like Kim said, that's a pretty big question, and I got a little nervous about how I was going to answer it, but then just hearing Kim talk about too that we all recognize this is a huge topic, and we're here to kind of collectively talk about our little bits and how it all integrates. So that's it. My name is Jennifer Ciminelli. I work at VCU Center for Environmental Studies. I'm an assistant professor. I am an environmental scientist, and my specialty is the use of geospatial technology to help in conservation planning. So some of the things that I work on, I try to help promote, actually one of the new things I'm working on is promote scenic resources in Virginia. I work on a lot of watershed landscape characterization projects, and you know, I work on all these different things, and actually the easiest way to kind of explain what I do in my research is that I almost am like an environmental technology consultant, and I work with state partners and research partners, and what I do is I'm able to use geospatial analyses to help support their research and hopefully to help support positive policy making. And so when it comes to water-related issues, the arena that I work in is a lot of watershed characterization. So how do I describe the current landscape, and what impact is this type of landscape having on things like water runoff? One of the things that I have worked on pretty consistently throughout my career is green infrastructure. So, you know, getting grants or supporting folks to help implement greening solutions in their community to help mitigate urban runoff pollution. So think puddles. Actually, we just had a big storm in Richmond and VCU campus flooded, and there was students actually swimming in front of one of our cafes. And it all kind of ties back to this idea of how we built the landscape up and climate change. And as we have these increased and more dramatic events, how can we help mitigate that? And so in addition, I'm co-teaching a service learning class because we thought, how can we get the students involved? And the service learning class has to do with cataloging the tree inventory on one of our campuses to say, here's where trees are, here's where trees are not, here's the value of trees for urban runoff and carbon sequestration, and then develop a prioritization plan of, well, let's plant more trees and where should we plant them to promote not only a healthy environment, but a healthier community. So you're always going to have to stop me because once I start talking, I'm like talking, but that's
great. And the great thing is that since I know each of you, I'm already writing things down that you haven't mentioned that I'll bring up later. But, I think about especially some of you talked about some of that technology and helping to make positive policy and helping to kind of support research. And I also think about your work in storytelling. And so maybe we can talk about some of the power of storytelling and how data supports that as we kind of move on and we connect our different disciplines. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Kim, tell us a little bit about who you are and what water-related threats you're seeing and some of the solutions you're working on, because you're working in maybe an area that people might not have thought about.
Well, I think that my focus has been on people, and I'm speaking too quickly. Kimberly, thank you for inviting me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation, and thank you to VCU for having us here today. Yes, my name is Kim Sudderth, and I am the Virginia organizing manager for a group called Mothers Out Front. And my focus is on women and mothers or people who have children in their lives that they care about. And the thing that we're fighting for right now is a livable climate for all children. And that's a big, heavy lift. I believe that it is going to take all of us. And my particular focus is on women and their empowerment and taking up space in the environmental justice movement. I feel like I am leaving out part of the bio, so I'll just also say that in addition to being a statewide manager, I'm also the chair of the Norfolk Environmental and Climate Justice Committee for the Norfolk NAACP, and working really close. Oh, I also serve on the Planning Commission for the City of Norfolk, where we do talk about the availability of land and how we're simultaneously just about 95% built up, and we're losing land to subsidence from the water. So here in Norfolk and Hampton Roads at large, we're on the front lines of climate change, and so my focus is on environmental justice. I do connect with mothers and women to what I know is that if you're Black and you're brown or poor or a combination, you're probably going to be affected by climate change first and worst. And so when I think about your question, Kimberly, about what are some of the water related threats that we see, quite often it's centered around loss. People lose their financial well-being, and it takes an emotional toll. You lose property. One of our volunteer moms, she's lost 3 cars in 10 years. And that's like a hassle, right? Having to deal with insurance and things. But then when you rely on your one car to get to work, when you can't use your car, now you might lose your job, which creates another financial hardship. And then thinking about housing, and how finding a safe place to live that won't get flooded out once a month, that's another challenge. And so I've come to learn that climate change is really an injustice amplifier. Whatever injustice you're dealing with, climate change is just going to exacerbate it and multiply it. And it makes you feel isolated. So that sounds really big and heavy and scary, but one of the joys of my work is that I get to connect with women who face this and bring them together, and they can encourage each other. And collectively, we talk to decision makers and let them know what we're going through, what stories, share our stories, and then demand answers and solutions. Thank you.
That was, yeah, the work that you all do is expansive and incredible. And I am so excited for us to start talking about it more and to kind of leverage some of those connections here, because I know that that Kim, you that is your expertise, is this connecting and being able to leverage your positionality and the positionality of others to make a difference in this movement. And I just want to also, you like just touched on it a little bit, but that idea of empowering women to become leaders in a climate change movement, and maybe especially Black and Brown women to become leaders in this movement and to see themselves there. This is an incredibly important part of the work that you do, right?
Absolutely. I feel like how oppression works, it shows up in many areas, and the way oppression thrives is to make you feel alone and helpless. And if you're a mother with multiple children, maybe multiple jobs, and maybe the very last thing you think you have time for is to become active in the climate movement. And what we try to do is, they say that many hands make light work. So if it's just maybe an hour a week where you're filling out postcards and mailing them to your decision maker to let them know, like, hey, I care about this thing, or phoning or texting, we try to make the barriers to participation lower and lower. And again, it's encouraging because you're in community with other moms who are dealing with the same thing. And there's the additional joy of fighting oppression. So in all its many forms. So I'm really excited about the work that we do and the women that we work with.
Thank you so much, Kim. And Cameron, I mean, I feel like a lot of the things that Kim said just makes my social work heart beat a little bit faster. And so can you tell us a little bit about who you are, and you're representing social work here, about the water related threats we're seeing in social work and some of the solutions that social work's working on. So you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. And I mean, Kim, absolutely, my heart is like beating because you are saying exactly the social work lens that we work to help people, at least students in the program, get to a place where that is the lens in which we are seeing things. So a lot of things I have on my notes of things to say, I appreciate that you have already voiced them, and I will just be additional support to it. So I am Cameron Carter. I'm in the School of Social Work. I'm Assistant Director of Field Education. And I joined the School of Social Work in 2011 in the Office of Field Education. And I came to social work, though, even as a student, I came as an environmentalist. So that was me first before I came to social work. And I realized pretty quickly what Dean Angel and Kimberly have been talking about is that this is new for social work. It's new in 2021, kind of in social work, to be thinking of environmental issues as social justice issues. One thing that I feel like I've really invested in my time in the field office is to help support, looking into non-traditional fields of social work practice and help create experiential learning experiences there, whether it is a field placement or some other opportunity. If I'm able to help a student who has this passion to be in a placement and learn social work in that space, then they in turn will go and work in communities and continue the ripple effect. And so it's been important to me to support these non-traditional social work path journeys. And I hope that we will make this more traditional path is environmental justice as social justice issues. I think particularly some of the places that were kind of new to social work for those placements were things related to food justice, food insecurity, green spaces, gardening as an intervention, especially in schools. And so that's just to name a few. Also, in my faculty role, I have developed a number of or helped to support and develop some service learning opportunities that are not necessarily related to internships, and also a study abroad programs. And so one that relates specifically to this is taking students to the Dominican Republic for a study abroad, where we worked with an NGO, a non-government organization, and we worked with them, and they work in community. So it was important for us to partner with somebody who was already embedded into the community, and we were there to learn and support the work. And so we really worked on clean water access in homes. And so the organization is called Community Service Alliance, and we were going with them out into the community and working to install these, they were water filtration kind of cones, so that water that was taken from nearby streams or collected from the rain could be, filtered, and then people would have less illness and less things that you don't want in your water in the water. So it was all related to health and well-being. So that's just one of the pieces tethered to the School of Social Work, where we've been able to work in the environmental access and justice piece. So I think, Kim, you really spoke to the social justice lens that we bring in social work. So I think being social workers in community settings, we want to come from that lens where we examine the power and privilege, we recognize the systemic racism and the impact it has on communities, and then work to help advocate for change and gather others to advocate for change. So partnering with an organization like Mothers Out Front would be ideal in that work. And so I think you spoke really well, Kim, to kind of the impact that I'm seeing on communities that has specifically had a history of oppression from systemic racism related to housing policies, land rights, community investment into infrastructure, and that it's really impacting kind of things I've seen related to natural disasters. Who's able to live where, what's invested in for the infrastructure to keep things safe. Is this a choice move if people have to relocate? Is it forced migration? And what's the cost to the individual, to the family? Other things I've seen are issues related to water quality, pollution, access to clean water, and also drought and what that does, and the ability for people and communities to grow their own food and live there. So in relation to the kind of some solutions that are social work related is really this. It's building community, collaborating, educating, working on community organizing pieces, and working to infuse it more in social work curriculum. So that means advocacy to our own colleagues. It means advocacy to the accrediting body, and really working to bring stakeholders together like this so that we can learn from one another. And that we want to focus on how do we change policies and figure out allocation of resources and wealth and things that make sense and help people live in a world that's healthy for them and their families and their communities.
And so if you're a social work student here or another student and you thought, as Dean Angel said in the beginning, like, I have no idea why it's related. I hope that Cameron's kind of explained all the different ways that social work is and can be working in this area. But as someone who is also in this area, I know that there is actually so much that I, even in my work, am pulling on multiple different disciplines, and social work is not itself yet prepared with the geospatial technology, and social work itself has a lot to learn about organizing frameworks, radical organizing frameworks in a way that is responsive and respectful of especially the labor that Black and Brown communities have been doing outside of social work for centuries. And so there's a bigness to it. There's an expansiveness to it. I think all of us can maybe even, we could speak to how this in our professions, in the work that we're doing, it feels like there's research about it. There's theory about it. There's research about it. There's policy about it. There's practice, what we do about it, right? There's intervention. And so there's lots of different ways that I think each of our different disciplines comes and organizes around those. I know social work, especially, we think about those different tiers, and that's why it feels so big. So I want to narrow us in a tiny little bit. Just as full disclosure, this is not scripted. This is a little bit, we're demonstrating in vulnerability a little bit of what it might look like to connect over different disciplines together in real time. All of us were brought here today to really talk about climate change, and specifically the way that we see the effects of climate change in water-related threats. Right, there's this paradox, and this is the scenario that we are coming together around. We need water to live, right? But in the context of climate change, it can be a threat to the life and livelihoods of many. And these aren't really just faraway problems. We know that in Virginia, we're seeing the effects of climate change in the form of sea level rise, recurrent nuisance, flooding. Again, that affects that physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual levels. We're seeing heavy rainfall, just to name a few. And although not all Virginians experience these issues in the same way, there is a disproportionate experience of water-related threats. The environment and the humans in it have the potential to be affected. We all have the potential to be affected by these threats in significant ways. So we've come here from different professions and positions. And we know that climate change and its effects on vulnerable communities and is an issue of pressing concern to all of us, to environmental scientists, to activists, to social workers. However, none of our fields is prepared to tackle this enormous issue on its own. And so because I know you all, I see the connections, but for the rest of our time together, can we talk about interdisciplinary partnership? What would it look like to partner with someone here in the room? What would you hope to accomplish? What do you need from others? Where is your work lacking? Where do we need to reach out to each other? What can we offer to each other here? So I leave it kind of free for all, and I'll jump in and see where I can make other connections. But who would like to start us out? Where do you see your strengths of your work, and where would you reach out to first? So let's get that started.
Well, I know that I wrote a couple of things down while Jen and Cameron were talking, and Jen, I was thinking one of the things I still kind of struggle with is matching technical solutions with the people who are closest to the problem. And one thing that's happening right now is Virginia is a part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. They call it RGGI for short. And we've had a few auctions on carbon credits. And so there's like all this money in this fund right now. And the first round of grants have gone out, and those grants will be awarded to communities. Many of them will be awarded to communities that are under a direct threat of flooding. And they're like, yeah, here's this money, and fill out this grant form and tell us what your solutions are. And it's like, yeah, that's easier said than done. And my fear is that folks who maybe are closest to the solution, but farther away from the problem, they might start saying, oh, sure, let's put up seawalls, and which seawalls are great. But if it's moving water away from one area, that water has to go somewhere. And will it affect some people who did not get a say? That was a lot of words. So Jennifer, one of the things I thought about in a way that I think I would love to partner with you is being able to connect you and folks from your field with those communities that are directly impacted. And then together we can come up with solutions that are viable for all and equitable. And yeah, and seeing about having to put the money in the right place and in the right hands.
Yeah, that's funny, Kim. So I have the same exact story, but opposite, because I actually did get grant money and picked a location because I wanted to do it there, and then derived all these solutions and thought I did a great job, and then went to a couple of civic association meetings and was like, here's this really helpful information. And then we were like, holy cow, I think we did this a little backwards. And, that was a tough lesson, but the connection really is that, scientists have tools and we can make assessments and we have data, but really what we need help with is first listening and hearing what's important and what additional things we have to include in our analysis. Like you're saying, maybe not a seawall, maybe we need to look up the whole area, what's feasible and what's going to help out mental health, what's going to help nourishment and nutrition, what's going to help education, and so that's kind of not really even an answer, but I guess what I'm saying is, you have that piece, you have the tie into the communities and you're listening. And that's what I need. I need someone to tell me what to do essentially, because I'm happy to do it, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Cameron, what comes to mind for social work too is thinking about, even as Kim has said this and Jen, and I also know the back end, having worked in this research in this area, is like maybe social work could jump in to help think about who gets to be the expert. Like we can help facilitate and build some bridge. Kim, I love the way that you said like people closest to the problem versus people closest to the solution, and kind of creating that bridge, but maybe even knocking down the bridge altogether and bringing it so that those two groups are actually quite integrated, and the work in Jen's office and the work, Kim, that you're doing. So, I mean, I think about who gets to be the expert, and social work can help move the needle on who gets to be the expert. We have participatory solutions. We think about who gets to get the grants, right? And, because the experts, whoever's deemed expert gets the grants, right? And I don't know, that's a really big question, a really big thought, but Cameron, any idea, any feedback, affirmations on that, or what you've heard here, what social worker could jump in and do?
Oh yeah, I agree with you completely. Kimberly, is figuring out how to be a bridge, I mean, lots of times if you're thinking more, clinically based social work or case management, you're working to find the right resources for people, right? And making that connection. And so spreading that out more macro or even meso practice is really being in the spaces to hear what the needs are. And then like, oh, okay, so let's connect this person with this person to kind of make that community. And I do agree with a way to address power imbalances. The people who hold that decision-making power in the grant funding or, the pieces of what even is put in that RFP to go out to ask for the grant, like if we can be in the rooms there too, and somehow bring that power imbalance more into play and have community have a lot more voice, so that what is actually needed in the community can be leveraged and supported versus, a project that somebody thinks is a good idea, right? But then is missing the mark on community implementation and insight.
So Kim, what does that look like for someone to come in without co-opting the work? You know what I mean? Like, how does someone come alongside without co-opting the work in this environmental context?
Yeah, it's tricky because I talk about this quite often in organizing circles. We talk about parachuting in and making decisions about people without people, those that are, directly impacted. And while we can all agree that this climate crisis is urgent, sometimes the fastest way to go is slow. And so you go to the Civic League meeting and you think, oh, we had a great meeting, I'm ready to go. But not yet. You still have to talk to the other community leaders that may not hold a title. There might be folks that gather in I would say, a community square, if you will. In my former neighborhood in Berkeley and Norfolk, there were several gentlemen that meet up every night at this particular corner. And I truly believe that they're solving the world's problems every night right there. And if they're listening now, I would love an invitation, but I won't go without an invitation. But I would suggest that, hey, as we're talking to leaders, talk to that group. Let's talk to the older, maybe seniors at the senior center. What are you guys seeing? What do you, talk to moms at the PTA, even teachers at the school, but be willing to really, really do what we've been calling ground truthing, and talking directly to people and asking questions and being willing to get kicked out. Like sometimes it's just like, you know what, Kim, I know you like my neighborhood, they used to call me the pipeline lady for the longest time because I was fighting this pipeline. And I had to be the crazy pipeline lady for a little while until they trusted me enough to say, okay, now tell me about this pipeline. It takes a while. It takes some persistence and patience. But you can only move at the speed of trust. So it does take a little while. It takes a lot of talking, a lot of listening. And eventually you come into community and you start getting some good work done.
Jen, what is your work need? Or what do you bring some amazing stuff. What do you want to share out? What do you think that maybe social work could use, Kim could use, and what do you want to draw in?
So I would say first, listening to Kim talk about all this, now I'm like, great, now I need to get a degree in social work. Right? And it's the same thing as soon as now I need to be an expert on climate change. And now I'm really into electric vehicles. And so I think the first thing I would say is patience and the longevity in the community is what I lack. And I do feel a little bit like I'm running out of time, and just the way, research grants are structured and the time frame and the money that you're given, there's a real limitation to how much I could dedicate to spending with the community, even though I want to, because I really do enjoy it. And so I think first I'll say, I think partnering is key. So we talked about this at the other, that we're all very siloed, and it is what it is. We're specialists and we're very focused on what we do. I think it's important to admit that you can't know it all, and that I need an expert, and not just a bridge, or not someone to come in and help me. I need a full-on partner who understands this and becomes part of my analytical cycle. Right? At defining the problem and identifying what we need to solve, I need my partner there. And then it makes me think even bigger, how do we start doing this? Maybe we start doing this institutionally at the level, like maybe there should be social work classes for environmental scientists. Maybe that becomes part of our curriculum, and vice versa with social work and other groups. Maybe they need to understand the main issues and some of the main drivers, but we don't have to become experts in these things, but we start building those connections. And so, I think I have a lot of experience in the different projects and how things worked and haven't worked, and the science side of the house and the technology. But I really kind of need someone to just come to me and say, we have this need and here it is, and let's go for this grant. And because so many of us are doing good for the world, and pretty much I'm sure every single one of us would be like, that's cool, I'm totally into that, sign me up, even though we're doing 75 things, but I'm always like, I love that idea, let's do it. So I think we need to make even like a team or a pool of people that when the grant comes in, and grants are competitive, but we need to rise above that and say, let me look, in my network. What if we created a network or, those, what are they called? Like nodes. And we start plugging in folks who want to do this, who want to participate. And then we can have that. And then when the grant comes up, we can look through and say, I'm going to ping this person and this person as a resource. I don't know. I'm just
and it's bringing you're doing it is amazing. Yeah. And I think like that I was envisioning almost like a toolbox where we're all kind of like tossing the tools in, like, and there's, some of us are more expert on different tools and things, but they're all actually accessible to all of us. And I like that idea of the node. And this, I'm not sure how popular this opinion might be, but I think that interdisciplinary work requires authentic interdisciplinary work that solves big issues actually requires a lot of vulnerability. And it requires the vulnerability to say, as you were saying, like, I don't know, or even the vulnerability to stand up and say, actually, I do know, and I do know this, and I think that this could be useful and could be used here. And that takes a lot of leadership and courage as well. So just some thoughts on this idea of the node or coming together. And I like the idea of rising above competition because competition breeds silos and silos breed oppression. And as we have stated, we are no longer into that because it's 2021 and we're still wrestling with the same problems.
I saw a question in the chat for Cameron. Did you?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer it. I don't want to interrupt though if we are, depending on where we are in our conversation. I can hold off till it's Q&A time.
Let me hold off till it's Q&A. And if we're kind of pausing, I have an idea of one thing that I wanted to see if we could gel around and see where all of our professions and work is. So maybe this is flipping a little bit out of the fishbowl, and something I've picked up on each of you actually is the storytelling piece. And whether it's social work, re-narrating social justice or environmental issues as justice issues. Jen, having known you for several years and you working with students that are using visual storytelling for environmental issues. Kim, I know that you have worked to help folks actually re-narrate their own lives and their own experiences in an environmental context. So maybe actually could each of us, if that interests you, pick it up. Where is your profession working in storytelling? And I am a little biased because I do think that like as a species, we work with stories and stories help kind of move the needle. And so where is your work around storytelling and where could we go with it together?
I would say that the work that I've been doing is centered around storytelling and story sharing. And we base our storytelling training on the work of Marshall Gans. He's a professor in Harvard, and he leads the Leading Change Network. And part of his research and his studies around movement making has found that the most effective movements were based on storytelling and people sharing their stories. So there's a training that we host, and it's my favorite training by far, a public narrative training. And typically it's like an 8-hour long workshop, and like nobody wants to go to an 8-hour long workshop. And I get that, but it's so worth it. And it just gives you the opportunity to share your own personal story that includes why you're in this movement at all, and really ties your passion for this work with others. And then eventually we figure out how can we work together get all of this work done. And I found that that usually our storytelling is a lot more effective than sharing data and science. No shade to the scientists out there at all. It's just that after a while, numbers start to just kind of look like numbers and not real people and not real lives. And so when you're able to bring yourself in full to this work and this movement, it's hard, you can argue data all day long, right? Like, everyone can gather their own set of data, but like talking to people and listening to their stories and connecting with them, like you can't deny that. So I found it very effective, and it's the center of the work that we do.
Yeah, I agree, Kim. And well, I agree too that science can, even though I love it, it's not boring to me, but only so many people care about a p-value before they're like, go away from us, right? But so I have some classes in creating story maps, and essentially it weaves a story with mapping and creating geographic context for issues or stories, whatever you're talking about. And so the visuals, really it's focused on providing really beautiful pictures, some narrative, and then presenting the power of where. So when we have issues, and I have actually gone into meetings and presented a bunch of data and said, this is happening and this is happening, and it is easy to be dismissed, even as a scientist with a lot of data. But when you're in a public meeting or speaking with, political people, that's a really easy way to just be dismissive of it. But when you take it, and the power of the story maps and mapping is you create this visual image, right? And then you show the data translated into this image, and it becomes where, and it is the power of where. And you can't really deny it. And then other people in the room start seeing it too. And they're like, hey, I live there. And when you do projections, holy cannoli, you have to be ready for the feedback, what's going to happen. But story mapping and storytelling is very compelling. And one of the things, it's funny because, again, this is where I'm failing. But when I talk about story maps and translating our message we run an analysis and then we package up the analysis and say, let's tell a story about what we're trying to share. And when I teach the students this, I always say at the end, don't leave them hanging. Like, don't leave them feeling super depressed or defeated. Give them the what's next. Like, you called them to action. So where's the action? And so imagine I had this whole pool of resources where I could then be like, here's where you need to go for action. But I agree, the power of narrative and storytelling and creating that context of space and how close these issues are really can be powerful. Yeah.
I remember there was I was talking with an organizer, and there was a community where they were going to maybe put a compressor station, and the people who were in charge of siting the compressor station said, there's no one there in that enclave. There's no one there. But instead, so there was data, visual storytelling that said, there are people here. Like they said, no, of course there's no one there. And like, it seems outlandish that this would happen, but this happens all the time. And so even if we're talking about water related threats, we're talking about anything, like it's not a big deal. There's no one there. Number one, it is a big deal, regardless of if there is human species there, but it's also a big deal because people's lives matter so little. Especially Black and Brown lives and Black and Brown communities matter so little sometimes in these conversations that someone can wave their hand and say there's no one there. And so if you're here listening as a participant, I think part of us coming together is to demonstrate actually what tools are being used against communities, against people, to wave and say these threats are no big deal, to make obvious what is not obvious, if it's not obvious to you yet, that there's people are using tools on all sides. And so storytelling, I think, can be a really powerful tool to re-narrate who who matters in these conversations. Cameron, any other additional insight around storytelling?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up in that way, Kimberly, because what I was going to speak to is the personal experience I've seen. So not in environmental related, but in another project, community engaged work with individuals experiencing homelessness. We did partner with a storytelling, like a partner who did some workshops with us. And the way in which people felt empowered when they were given the space to have a voice in a way when people traditionally dismiss them without even, getting to know someone or giving them space to share their own story. And so just seeing the personal impact on people when they had workshops where they wrote their story, and then we were getting to the space where we were going to work on sharing them up more publicly, but then we had a pandemic, so we didn't quite get to that spot. And pivoting to the online wasn't a thing. Back in the spring of 2020 was it 2019, I'm forgetting at this point, but anyway, I saw the precursor to it. So people just having the space to write down their story and talk to other people in the group about it, and how much it shifts the narrative on who has permission, I guess, to have a voice in our society. And so just speaking to that a little bit on how powerful being able to narrate your own story is. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Cameron. I think that stories humanize hard issues. And I think that that's what's missing. I think, Kimberly, I might have joked about this when we first talked about how the official like poster child for climate change is the polar bear.
Right.
And I just, again, no shade on polar bears. I'm sure they're lovely creatures, but I've not met one, and not personally. And I think that when we humanize the issue, like Kimberly said a moment ago, like no one is there. And what I hear is really, it's no one you care about is there. That's what that means. And so when you don't care about the real life people that are there, it makes it a lot easier to place a compressor station there. And it just makes it easier to make those decisions. And so as we're, talking to people and connecting with them, and empowering them to the point where they feel comfortable maybe testifying at a hearing for a permit for that compressor station, they show up, take up space, and say, see, I am a person, I'm a real live human, and I am here. And I'll tell you, it's been successful. Just to brag a little bit, not on myself, but on the work that we've all done collectively, the climate movement. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline was canceled, several compressor stations, several power plants, all of it based on people showing up, but not the usual folks, right? It's the people who live there. Union Hill, which is a community established by Friedman, and they showed out consistently and eventually wore the ACP down, and now it's been canceled. Like, this stuff works.
I'll add to this too, from kind of a different perspective of storytelling, is that I think some of the things that can be intimidating to get involvement and get people involved is people often will say to me, like, I don't even know what to ask for from you. Yep. Because they don't know the technical jargon, and they just don't know what we can do. And I encourage people, and actually I was a consultant too, and one of the things I learned was how the power of people telling you their narrative is we're listening for keywords. No one's going to say to me, I want you to run a landscape characterization for me. No one's going to say that unless they know what that word means. But what they might say is they might start telling me about, the sewer backing up every time they're sitting, I know where all the bus stops are. I know in 301 which ones have puddles in front of that always start backing up right away. But when we start listening to these stories, I can put the pieces together and I can literally hear it and be like, I can visualize. We need to look at the impervious surface. We need to look how it's flowing, and we need to look where the green space is, and we need to look where the trees are. And so it's really powerful to do that beginning part of listening and hearing the stories. It could help inform our work really, really with a greater impact and reach. So
that's so important, Jen. One of the things, as we construct our stories and we testify in front of decision makers, we have to emphasize what we call the ask, like capital T, capital A, the ask. And sometimes we struggle on that because we aren't quite sure what the solution is. We know this is a bad idea, but what's the good idea? And I think that's where, you might come in, Jennifer, in that sense. And then also like policy experts. Quite often we talk to, senators or Congress people, and we say, hey, we really are excited about, let's say, electric school buses. We want to make sure every public school in Virginia has electric school buses. And they're like, great, what do you want me to do about it? Well, make it so, but it's not that easy. It's writing a whole policy and getting it passed through the General Assembly, and none of that is easy to do. And so based on, I think, the idea around coalition building, we do need all of those experts in the room at the same time to have these discussions.
So, we don't really have that many Q&A yet. So I just want to put a plug and say, hey, if you have a question, you can drop it into Q&A. And we can start addressing that. I know we have one at least that I'd like for us to talk about. Now, so the question is social work specific, but maybe it could actually lead us into all of us thinking about maybe, especially Jen and Kim, thinking about what is something that people attending this event can do to positively impact this issue, right? So don't leave them with the despair, but leave them with what's the next step. And so let me start first though with the question that was asked for Cameron specifically. I'm currently in my first year of the M.S.W program at VCU. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. And environmental justice is a major passion of mine. I'm going to do a macro specialization. What are some examples of field placements? Cameron works in the field office, Office of Field Education. What are some examples of field placements social workers are placed in with an environmental justice lens? And are there currently any macro classes in this focus? So Cameron.
Sure. And I will lean on your partnership here, Kimberly. Right. So environmental justice lens, I think more historically has focused on community-based aspects related to food security is how it's shown up in the Richmond area. So that has been partnerships with Tricycle Gardens, partnerships with Shalom Farms, partnerships with Neighborhood Resource Center, which was connected, has been connected to each one of those, and other community-based organizations. I think some things that we wouldn't, might not normally think of, though, would be our partnerships in the General Assembly. So we can have an environmental justice lens based on who you're interning with. So we have a traditional longstanding placement with Senator McClellan, Jennifer McClellan. So depending, and we've had others. So depending on who you're with, that could be an environmental justice lens. We have them at the state level in like Lieutenant Governor's office. We've had people, it really just depends kind of on what the scene is at that level and where social workers are. I say that with a caveat. We also like to help students explore their passions and figure out if there's a space where there isn't currently a social worker, how can we leverage our community contacts and help make that a placement and find a social worker with that, with that background to help support the experience the student is having. I feel like I'm forgetting some, Kimberly, with environmental focus.
Well, I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head too. I think Department of Health, I don't know if we place students here. Yeah. But that's also an example of finding and connecting with people who have an environmental bent to their work. And it might not feel like this is exactly what they're doing. It's not an environmental justice organization, but there are someone there who is keen to and open to it. What I love about the people that we work with as community partners, that as you're developing your learning plan in field, you might consider thinking about how could I live into the competencies that ask me to understand environmental justice. And so what I love about our learning plan, I think going on that, the learning plan model, is that you can kind of build out the work that you're going to do in conversation with the field placement as well. Cameron, does that still feel right? I don't want to say anything that's not correct.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it can be in your current placement. If you're currently in field, it can be something you build out more fleshed out, and you might come across with a particular agency that would be a really good fit, and we can talk about that. This is an emerging field of practice, so there are things we didn't know, years ago, or organizations that have come along, or people doing the work in different spaces. There's often social workers without a social work title, especially in the macro setting. They might have the title of program coordinator or
executive director,
community organizer. They might
volunteer coordinator.
Yeah. So there's social workers everywhere, which is very exciting. Sometimes you just don't know until you know. So it's something where we can definitely grow that. Related to classes, I'd love to plug your class, Kimberly.
Well, a few years ago, I developed a class which was social work in the natural environment, and we don't offer that class at this time, right? But there's because it feels like there's a lot of priority areas, and I in the meantime, though, have been working in independent studies with students who are exploring environmental themes, social work, and environmental practice. And so if that's something that you're interested in the meantime, connect with me. We can explore independent study options and people who are here to offer and supervise independent studies. But I'd love to see it. I'd love to see an environmental justice certificate dual degree happening. I know that environmental sciences has been open to thinking about kind of some cross listing before. And so what it requires is for us to make sure that it's a priority area, and that happens by us sharing that it's a priority area for us. And so Cameron and I are here in social work and representing that, and we're not the only ones. So I know that there's a groundswell kind of coming here around this as being a priority issue, especially as it connects to our learning on organizing. It connects to our learning on the bio, psychosocial, spiritual. It connects to the power of green in healing, and the power of green spaces and mental health. But then everything that we talked about here today, when we frame environmental justice and some of the threats around climate change, even as a social justice issue, then my perspective is that environmental justice is social justice, and that the work of environmental justice advocates and environmental scientists is key to liberation of the communities that social work holds dear. And so I don't actually know if they can be separate anymore. I think we're kind of coming to that. Maybe they haven't been separate for a long time. Kim, you're kind of giving me the eyes like, yeah, yeah.
I'm right with you. That all sounds absolutely accurate. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I wanted to also ask the two of you, Jen, Jen and Kim, what are some things that you think about plugging in the people who are here, maybe into how can we plug into positively make an impact on this really, really big issue?
I'm really interested in the story mapping. I know that, we're still in the age of COVID and the pandemic, and it is rather difficult to bring large groups of people together, but being able to communicate different stories collectively that could be shared digitally, that would be very helpful, I think.
So Kim, that could be an independent study project for one of the social work students interested in environmental justice. And like, I could see how this would work because there's a fair bit of interviewing and creating the narrative, but any one of us can do it, but what is going to make it as effective is someone who actually understands what's being said and can put it in context. So I can listen to someone, but I don't have the social work lens that Cameron has been talking about. And so to have someone who has that background and to be able to listen and focus on the environmental perspective and weave the story, then it's fairly straightforward for me to teach the technical side. And when I talk about like geospatial analysis, things that we can include are we could look at landscape features, we could look at where parks are, we could look at where trees are, we can analyze any type of socioeconomic demographic data you could possibly think of. Am I interested in elementary age school kids and the impact on them? Well, sure. Then I'm going to tell you how many live where and what they're suffering from or not suffering from, what the issue is. And actually, as Cameron was talking about these experiences and Kimberly was talking about the experiences, in addition to there is a big work in the heat island effect in the city of Richmond. And there's lots of story maps about that. And they've done a good job of sharing that information of what the heat island effect is. When you look at where these locations are in context of redlining districts and historical development and the communities being impacted, it's all environmental justice. It's all social work. What's interesting is the high amount of impervious surface. And because we have all that high impervious surface, when we have these massive rain events, we're having huge urban runoff issues as well. And the water has to go someplace. And so the neighboring communities that are there are not able to absorb that water. And so we just have this compounding effect. And so I think, who would think that maybe the Science Museum needs a social work student there and an internship with them, and they need to provide the background context. And I'm not a social worker, so I don't know what your magic powers are. I think I have an idea, but like if you could bring that to the table, I could just, and Kim, we're going to connect and I have a bunch of, and for anyone that's, listening to, if folks are interested, please, I love it. Email me and I have lots of things that can help folks get started, at least exploring some of the technology.
So we've got a couple of other questions and comments coming in. So first, and I think our hosts will share out this information regarding geospatial science and climate change and humanitarian work, the Geo for Good virtual conference in mid-November. So we'll get that shared out to folks who are there. So thank you for that. We also have a couple of questions. So this question is, I'm curious if anyone has seen social work in offices like DEQ, who oversee environmental regulations and controls of pipeline construction. And I'd also open it up to think about not just social workers, but people doing organizing and connecting and building bridges between people closest to the problem and people closest to the solution. So who's there dedicated to connecting stakeholders and those directly affected by land development? And any insight into DEQ that you all, I know that some of you all have some insight into that.
Well, I believe that the Virginia DEQ just received, I guess it was this year, the Environmental Justice Office.
Mhm.
I'm not certain. I believe that the person has been hired for that position, and I'm not certain what work they've done thus far. But at least there's that already in place. But one thing, and I'm so happy for this question, one of the things that has concerned me about the DEQ when it's time to connect with the community, two things. One is that quite often during the public commenting period, they only want to hear the technical comments, which is really interesting because most people wouldn't know the technical inner workings of a pipeline or a compressor station in order to voice their concerns about it. And so it's always helpful to have those folks who have that technical expertise to inform talking points and things that we can add together and weave into that story that we'd like to share. The other thing is that quite often those hearings are not held anywhere near the location where the people who would be directly affected. Again, if it's a pipeline in Roanoke or a compressor station in Chesapeake, more often than not, that technical commenting period will be in Richmond, or hearing will be in Richmond. And if you're, again, working mom with 2 or 3 kids, you'll have to find a babysitter, take time off of work, the expense of gas and travel. That makes it really prohibitive to participate.
Jen, I saw you unmuted. Any other insight into the DEQ process?
No, Kim did a really nice job there.
So the other question that we have, and I guess I just want to also amplify and echo what Kim has said. And I think that there's just, as a social work with a social work mindset, and I'm thinking about DEQ, it's not just this brings up something, it's historical knowledge. We actually need to be very, very aware and carry historical knowledge, and something might be happening right now. There's a town hall, there's an open comment period, and we might say, awesome, thank you so much for holding that. But we also need to be aware of the way that these organizations and communities have interacted historically. And when we go in that present moment and we see a dynamic, to be careful with how we interpret that if we're not holding the lens of history. And so what I mean is that when you have historically disadvantaged communities that are being talked at, and you're seeing that happen, and you might say, oh, we're so grateful that at least someone's coming and sharing information, how good, right? But step back and think like, and maybe investigate, and maybe go to the gatekeepers of community, and go to the experts who have been working in community for a long time, and ask some questions about like, what was I seeing? What can, how can I plug in if I'm seeing this, that sort of thing. So I just wanted to at least bring and carry the historical knowledge. It's something that we tend to lack, especially when something new and shiny shows up. And yeah, and I think that's such an important piece of social work education. And I'm wondering how environmental scientists too are incorporating historical knowledge into the work that they do. Oh, Jen's face told me everything I needed to know, which is, oh, not yet, working on it. So just putting that out there. Another question that came up was around, let's see, this is from Debo. I'm finishing my first year M.S.W. in the online program. Awesome. We're very excited, which is clinically focused. So our online program does not have a macro focus at this time. I'll be moving around the world, and I'm interested in how to connect story mapping internationally. And so that's the first part. The second part is around a central platform for social work at an international level, which maybe we can address second. But how is story mapping working internationally? Jen, any insight into ArcGIS and story mapping?
Yeah, so the ESRI, it's the parent company of ArcGIS Online, and that's just the software we use. But you can do whatever you want. You can make a PowerPoint presentation and make it a PDF. You could be very creative with just the technicality of creating a type of platform. Esri is an international organization, so they have a huge user base. For folks, I don't want folks to be overwhelmed at the technology. This is kind of a low lift on using this type of mapping. They've tried to make it very accessible and very affordable for organizations that want to try to use it. So, yeah.
And then the second part of this question is really around, is there a central platform for social work at an international level? And I feel a little light on international social work. And so I'm actually going to, maybe our host can send out, we can talk to one of our faculty members, Dr. Hyojin M, offers courses in international social work, does a lot of work internationally. And so maybe, and I know that Dr. M has touched on issues related to environmental justice in her courses as well at an international level. And so I would encourage you to reach out to Dr. M if you're interested in international social work. She's an amazing resource for that. Cameron, did I miss anyone?
Oh, I was going to add that, so social work is, you're going to internationally do a lot of things, and the title is not social worker. That's what I found internationally. So, you may have people doing the same functions, but the title is just different. So that would be one piece. I would say there is a resource. So the International Federation of Social Work, or of social workers. And so this is a great place for information. I think they do have a conference every year, but even just to see what kind of the international ethical things are that people are putting out there, because social work is different in different countries, and then the positions, like I said, are different. But I think it would be interesting for you to look and see how common our goals are, I think, internationally.
Do you all have any kind of closing or concluding thoughts, right? So we've talked about a lot. We've talked about our own work and the way that we have, we act individually within our work and our profession. I know that this is also very personal to many of us. We've either witnessed it or been close to those who have experienced the deleterious effects, right, of water-related threats. So as we kind of close here, any kind of final thoughts on the work that you're doing, the hope that you're feeling as we think about interdisciplinary work, and also any advice or final thoughts for those who are in attendance here today, or who might be watching the recording later. So just kind of to wrap up our time together today, what sort of wisdom do you have to offer us, or reflections on what you've learned here today too? Big questions always on these sorts of things, right? And not enough time.
That it is a big question, but I will say this: as you go forth in your career and whatever you're doing, the first thing is don't be afraid to fail, because through failure you can learn so much. And so not that I fail a lot, but I'm certainly open to things not working out, and then kind of looking for the opportunity in that. The other thing I'll say is, as an environmental scientist, I've always kind of known how the story might end, and it could be really scary and anxiety producing. And Kim talked about this too, and Cameron too, like you can feel very isolated and devoid of hope. But what I think collaborations help you do is you can lean on that side of the house. You can come and be exhausted. But once you start working with different sectors and different partners, they can hold you up. And when you have these small successes and local successes, really, sometimes I think that's where it's at. It would be great to have these huge things work out, but this there's so much you can do at the local level, but we hear a lot about the global world and a lot of things that are going on, that I would just encourage you as a scientist. I see hope, you know, in new technologies and smarter folks coming along, and with the realization that we have these collaborations, you know, like it says in the book Rising, you know, she's saying we can invite more people into the conversation and have a bigger impact. So be open to that, and lean on others.
That's great, Jennifer. I'll jump in, and I think this climate change as an issue is really scary and produces a lot of anxiety. I mean, we're talking about extinction of the human race and other species. So it's big and it's scary, and you want to hide under the covers, but we know that doesn't work. So what I hope that people will do is sort of normalize having discussion, even though it makes you a little uncomfortable. Just in dinner parties or casual conversations, just talk about it and let's normalize it. It's not political. It's not going to go away if we just ignore it. So I'd love to normalize just having the conversation that we're having right now. Also humanizing climate issues. And again, no shade on polar bears, but let's go ahead and put people on the cover of that magazine. When we have that discussion, it's actual people who live near, pipelines or compressor stations that pollute. Humanize the idea around climate solutions like solar panels and wind turbines. Let's just make all of that just normal. And then I would say, just even if you are feeling a little scared, just don't go through this alone. Find a group or make a group of people to talk about this with and take action. So those are my three.
Thank you. I think they go along with what I was going to recommend for people, which is to spend some time in your own self-audit. Like, how is this, like, look at a climate change issue. Kimberly gave us a great resource, the States at Risk website, which we can put in the chat. And you could pick any number of the climate change issues. It doesn't need to be water. I know that's what we're talking about today. There are plenty other, unfortunately. And so spend some time and see how it's impacting you, see how it's impacting your community, and also work to have this as one of the lenses in which you use every day to see the community around you. So perhaps you may be going, there may be people on the webinar who are not from Richmond, but maybe moved here to go to school. So it may impact you and your family differently, but then also looking around the Richmond area or wherever you live to see how things are impacting. And if you see things any differently now after this conversation on the different things that are impacting, if you are currently in practice, either working or in a social work internship, are you seeing the world any differently? And how can you help leverage having that conversation that Kim was talking about and humanizing it and making it a regular part of what we talk about in our everyday settings.
Thank you. And thank you all, the three of you, for being here. I'm so appreciative for the school for helping us to make this space for us together. Thank you all to our participants for you all to be asking your questions and your comments that are going throughout. We really appreciate being able to have this important discussion and looking forward to the ways that this starts to ripple out, to use this analogy of water as well. Like, what we've done here, what we have learned here will have an effect on us and the world around us. And I know that the four of us here do plan to continue these collaborations. This is a moment where we came together and we created something bigger than ourselves. And it really wasn't that hard or scary. You may also have been changed by this. And so for you who are in attendance, I'd really challenge you to be thinking about what is your next step as well. So thank you all so much.